situation in Krasnoarmeysk, conflicting assessments and escalating rhetoric. Against the backdrop of ongoing intense combat in the Krasnoarmeysk, also known as Pokrovsk area, the situation is taking on an increasingly dramatic and ambiguous character. Information coming from the theater of military operations differs radically in its interpretation by the warring parties, creating a dense information picture full of tense anticipation. It is reported that the active phase of the battle for this strategically important settlement is approaching a critical juncture. According to a number of sources, the Ukrainian military units defending the city have found themselves in an extremely difficult position, with reports even suggesting their operational encirclement by Russian army forces. In this context, the position of Ukraine's top leadership is attracting particular attention. As some analysts report, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky apparently is not issuing orders for a large-scale operation to deblockade and rescue the servicemen in this difficult situation, which raises questions about the further plans of the Kyiv regime. To assess the situation on the ground personally, the commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian armed forces, Oleksandr Syrsky, recently made a working trip. Following the visit, he publicly characterized the situation in Krasnoarmeysk as exceptionally complex and tense. In his brief address, General Syrsky identified the active actions of Russian infantry as the main threat in this sector of the front. He emphasized that the adversary prefers to conduct combat operations using dense urban development, which provides it with numerous shelters and tactical advantages. According to the commander-in-chief, Russian units avoid engaging in open clashes in open terrain, practicing tactics of maneuver defense and regularly changing their positions, which makes their detection and destruction extremely difficult. At the same time, the Ukrainian commander refrained from officially confirming or fully denying the circulating data about the formation of a so-called cauldron, in which, according to some estimates, up to 5,000 Ukrainian military personnel could be trapped. Despite this, he issued a direct and unambiguous order to begin evacuation measures, which may indirectly indicate the seriousness of the situation. During his visit, Syrsky held a series of closed meetings with officers commanding on the front lines, where he gave them specific and immediate directives. Among the agreed-upon measures were actions aimed at comprehensively strengthening the defense of key logistical routes, both those used for the supply of ammunition and food and those intended for the evacuation of wounded and rear units. Separately, the commander-in-chief stressed the acute need for the systematic identification, localization, and subsequent destruction of enemy assault groups and sabotage reconnaissance formations operating in the city blocks. Parallel to this, Oleksandr Syrsky made a rather harsh statement addressed to the command staff. He openly warned that in case of identifying facts of irresponsibility, negligence, or incompetence in the actions of individual commanders, the strictest disciplinary measures would be applied to them, up to and including immediate dismissal from their positions. As he explained, such radical steps are a forced but absolutely necessary measure to ensure the most effective fulfillment of assigned combat tasks and the subsequent stabilization of the precarious defensive situation in this region. As part of his visit, the Ukrainian commander-in-chief also attempted to publicly refute the theses and messages actively disseminated by the Russian side about the allegedly catastrophic and critical situation of Ukrainian troops in Krasnoarmeysk. Thus, A classic example of an information war is observed where the same operational situation receives two completely opposite interpretations. While official representatives from Moscow claimed the complete encirclement and blocking of a large Ukrainian armed forces grouping numbering approximately 10.5 thousand servicemen in the Pokrovsk area, the Ukrainian commander-in-chief, being directly in the near frontline zone, assesses the situation differently, more reservedly, and speaks not of a catastrophe, but of active steps being taken to correct and normalize it. The day before, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation circulated a statement announcing the existence of a direct order from the Supreme Commander-in-Chief, President Vladimir Putin, to ensure the unimpeded passage and access of foreign journalists and representatives of international mass media to the areas where, according to the Russian side, significant Ukrainian forces are blocked, namely in the vicinity of Krasnoarmeysk, Dmitrov, and Kupiansk. As clarified by the Russian Defense Department, the Russian military command is ready, if necessary, to unilaterally completely cease all combat operations on the specified sections of the front for a prolonged period, from 5 to 6 hours. Furthermore, the Russian side is ready to undertake obligations to organize and guarantee the security of special humanitarian corridors intended for the unimpeded entry and subsequent exit of film crews and correspondents from leading foreign, including Ukrainian media outlets. At the same time, it is necessary to particularly note one important nuance. Vladimir Putin has personally never made public statements about his intention to visit Pokrovsk on an inspection. The Russian side only proposed declaring a temporary local ceasefire, the main goal of which would be the safe access of journalists to the scene of events to provide them with the opportunity for independent and objective coverage of the real situation developing in this area. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky made a sharp and provocative statement in which he rather ambiguously allowed for the possibility of an assassination attempt on Russian President Vladimir Putin in the hypothetical event of his personal visit to Krasnoarmeysk. Elaborating on his thought, Zelensky stated that if the Russian leader were to actually risk appearing on the territory of this burning city, then everyone perfectly understands what this visit could ultimately lead to. Such rhetoric was perceived by many experts and political commentators as nothing other than a veiled yet direct threat of physical violence against the head of a foreign state. Simultaneously, the Ukrainian leader attempted to resolutely refute official reports from Moscow regarding the operational encirclement of the Ukrainian grouping in Pokrovsk. While he admitted that the situation in the city remains extremely tense and difficult, he nonetheless confidently stated that the Ukrainian military command continues to fully control and manage the situation. Thus, in his statement, Zelensky combined seemingly incompatible elements. On one hand, he made remarks that can be interpreted as a threat against the President of Russia, and on the other, he attempted to demonstrate to the world community a show of confidence in the strength and stability of the positions held by Ukrainian army units, despite the generally heavy and problematic situation on the front as a whole.